I call the Honourable Minister for Defence Materiel.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to have this debate about jobs, the most important thing in Australia. This is a debate about jobs, and every time we have a debate in this place about jobs, the opposition get it wrong. We had a debate in this place in 2008 and 2009 about jobs. What would it take to make sure that the economy didn't go into recession and we protect Australian jobs? We took the action that was necessary to stop a recession, protect Australian jobs. The opposition made the opposite position true. They decided to oppose the stimulus package, which would have, if we'd accepted the opposition's advice, cost 200,000 Australians their jobs. 2 Olympic stadiums full of people would have lost their jobs. 2 electorates represented in this parliament would have lost their jobs. In the course of that debate, the member for North Sydney, the Shadow Treasurer, this is back in April of 2009, said 300,000 Australians are going to lose their job in the government's first term. What happened? Well, because of the action that the government took, faced with the greatest economic crisis in 75 years, more than 700,000 Australians have got a job today than when the government took office just over 3 years ago, despite the GFC. They've made the same mistakes when it comes to the mineral resource rent tax. Scare campaign's been running now for close to 12 months. Keep hearing the story about how miners are going to lose their jobs. Well, since the government has announced the minerals resource rent tax, employment in mining has already grown by 10.3%, despite the scare campaign, despite the Liberal scare campaign. Companies are still investing in mining because they know there is a strong future in mining. That's 18,690 more mining jobs today than there were then. But if you want to go back into history, have a bit of a look at how the Liberal Party performs when you've got great economic structural debates about how to improve the economy, then you need go no further than the debate that this parliament had in the early 90s about compulsory superannuation. I went back and had a look at these debates, see what the Liberal Party said then. This is what some of your comrades said back in the 90s. David Connolly MP said it was absolutely abhorrent. Australia does not need and cannot afford these proposals at this time. Sounds similar to what we're hearing now. Wilson Tuckey, well missed. He said that superannuation was stupid and dishonest. Senator Alston said that it would be little short of lunacy to introduce this massive new cost burden on employers. Senator Paniza, this is a good one. Remember her? The worst case scenario, the loss of 100,000 jobs. Businesses and organisations will simply not be able to afford it. Small business will close down. There'll be 100,000 jobs on the line, and I can see 100,000 jobs quite easily going out the door within a few years. Senator Watson, there'll be rising unemployment as a result of this levy. Senator Crichton-Brown, yet another threat to Australia's future economic prosperity. Alan Rocher, disastrous impact on business. A tax on jobs. Well, what happened, Mr Speaker? What happened? Did compulsory superannuation destroy the Australian economy? Well, no, people didn't get sacked. New businesses were created, new jobs were created. It proved to be one of the most important economic reforms of the last century. It created new industries, created funds, now more than $1 trillion worth of funds under management, making Australia's superannuation savings the 4th largest capital pool in Australia. And it also created jobs, new jobs and more jobs. A report that was released in 2009 by the Association of Superannuation Funds estimated that 60,000 people are now directly employed in the superannuation industry. That's structural reform of the economy, creating new jobs. But the same scare campaign that we heard then in the early 90s is back and running again on climate change. The member for Indi, in her contribution to the debate, started with 1,000 Australian jobs exposed overseas. Then she amped up the tempo and said there'd be no manufacturing left. But that wasn't good enough. As we got towards the end of her contribution, she said 10,000 Australians would be unemployed. And then, just before the end,
Order. The
it would be
Minister for Defence Materiel will resume his seat. The honourable member for Indi.
Just to assist my colleague. Table, perhaps he should check Hansard before inaccurately.
I call the Minister for Defence
Well,
Materiel.
I'm sure Hansard will prove this one is correct when you went on to say the biggest destroyer of jobs in Australian history. The biggest destroyer of jobs in Australia. Forget the Great Depression. Forget the Great Depression. That's right up there with Gaddafi. Absolutely ridiculous. The economic reforms, is that right? The biggest destroyer of jobs in Australian history. You just have to go back to the quotes of the past and these previous debates to see how ludicrous those comments were in the past and how ludicrous these comments are today, and they should be dealt with the derision they deserve. Economic reforms,
the honourable member for Mayo.
Economic reforms, structural changes to our economy create new industries and create new jobs. That was the lesson, Mr Deputy Speaker, of the 80s and the 90s. Remember the fear campaigns about tariff reductions and other reforms from the Hawke and Keating governments. Fear campaigns said that the government was sellout, that industries would be destroyed, that jobs would be destroyed, that businesses would close. What did it do? It did the reverse. Big economic reforms from the 80s and the 90s made the Australian economy more competitive, made businesses more competitive by forcing them to innovate. And the lesson for us here when we're contemplating these reforms now is that economic reform, structural reform, creates new jobs. The Hawke and Keating reforms set the Australian economy up for this century to compete in new markets like China and East Asia, to make sure that we did not become the poor white trash of Asia. And creating new jobs is all about identifying the challenges of the future and acting upon them to give business the certainty they need. Now, in this reform, this is not easy, and we don't say that it is. It's going to require a lot of hard work by all of us. But the longer we wait, the more that this will cost. If carbon pollution is going to be capped in the future, businesses want to know what the rules are as soon as possible. They want certainty. The sooner that we set the rules, the sooner they can make the long-term investments and the long-term investment decisions that they need that will create jobs, create the jobs of the future. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, if we fail here, the cost of our indifference, will be paid by our children and paid by our grandchildren with their jobs. Because the longer we take, the more it will cost and the harder it will be to cut emissions and transform our economy into a low-carbon economy. The cheapest and the most effective way to do that is by putting a price on carbon. That's what the member for Wentworth has said on many occasions and tried to convince his party of. That's what John Howard, the former Prime Minister, said on many occasions and tried to convince his party of. That's what the member for Flinders said when he was at university. In his honours thesis, he said this. This is what he said at university. A pollution tax is both desirable and inevitable, even if some of the Liberals' constituents do respond negatively. A pollution tax does need to be introduced to properly serve the public interest.
Would the Minister please resume his seat? The honourable member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy
On what
Speaker.
basis is the member for Indi seeking the call, please?
Well, I'd like to draw your attention to the state of the House.
Quorum not present. Ring the bells.
Nice work done.
The member for Dixon.
I draw your attention, Mr Deputy Speaker, to offensive statements made just then by a member who's out of his seat and I'd ask that you ask him to withdraw that offensive statement.
What were the offensive statements?
Well, I'm not of a mind to repeat them, but they related to the member for Indi, and I think they are out of order. I took offence and he should withdraw them.
Well, I didn't hear them, and unless I'm aware, I didn't hear the remarks, and if I'm not told what the remarks are, obviously I can't have them withdrawn. If the member did make an offensive comment, I would ask him to assist the House, but unless I actually know what was alleged to have said, I can't take any action under the standing orders. I thought I was listening to him, and he certainly shouldn't have been interjecting from outside his seat, but I didn't hear anything that was unparliamentary.
Couldn't take the heat, Sophie. This is your MPI. Didn't like what's being said. You've got quorum.
Make these statements.
It was pretty accurate, what I said. So you don't want a question, John, with the MPI?
No, you want the Prime Minister to conduct yourself properly.
There's too much audible conversation across the table. Quorum present, I call the Minister for Defence Materiel.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And as you'll recall, I was just quoting from the member for Flinders' thesis that says that a pollution tax is desirable and that even if Liberals respond to it negatively, a pollution tax does need to be introduced to properly serve the public interest. I think if he was true to himself, he'd admit that today. But unfortunately, because of the extremists that have been involved in getting rid of the member for Wentworth and taking over the Liberal Party, he's now got to put together another plan which will cost taxpayers $10 million and, to be effective, would cost $30 billion and would mean that the taxpayers that we represent would end up paying an extra $720 a year on their bills because of an ineffective, badly designed carbon pricing mechanism. What's clear, Mr Speaker, you only need to see what the member for Wentworth said on Q&A the other night, is that no one supports the opposition's plan on carbon pricing. He was asked if there were any economists that support it, and he couldn't mention any of them. He couldn't mention it. No wonder economists don't support the opposition's plan. No wonder no economists support the plan, because it's a carbon plan designed by one nation. The same people who sent the emails to the Liberal MPs about the flood levy and Indonesian schools are the same one nation that sent emails try and scare the pants off the Liberal Party to get rid of the member for Wentworth. You go to the One Nation website and you hear them talk about times when Greenland was ice-free and now you can grow melons in England, and 1600s, Thames River, London freezing over. Then you go to 2009 and you see Tony Abbott saying the same thing. What's clear, Mr Deputy Speaker, is they're now more One Nation than they are one Liberal Party. More One Nation than they are one Liberal Party. That's why when they were interviewed by Phil Curry, they're saying, we're now being run by One Nation. Another one said that they were in the thrall of right-wing nutjobs. That's what they're saying about their own side to the journalist. Robert Menzies wouldn't recognise this party if he was alive today.
Become silent.
And one thing's to be sure, Malcolm Fraser wouldn't vote for it. It's a party so right-wing now, a party so right-wing, it makes John Howard look like Che Guevara. Now, John Howard did a lot of things. He did a lot of things, but he never took advice from Pauline Hanson.
The honourable member for Indi, on a point of order.
On relevance, Mr Deputy Speaker. He has not mentioned, the member for Clare has not mentioned jobs.
This is a wide-ranging debate. I warn the honourable member for Indi, the Minister for Defence Materiel.
They don't like it, they can hand it out, but they can't take it, can they? They can hand it out, but they can't take it, because the truth hurts, Mr Speaker. more One Nation than one Liberal Party. And as your own colleagues say, you're now run by a band of lunatics and right-wing nutjobs.
The Honourable Minister's time has expired.